Hundreds of thousands of new files on Jeffrey Epstein by law are due to be released today. But is the Department of Justice going to meet that legal deadline? In addition to the question whether the Department of Justice will meet its legal obligation are the questions who and what might be in those new documents. Plus, they found him dead, the killer of two at Brown University and another person at MIT. He turned the gun on himself, the killer did, and the break in the case came after help from some online sleuths. This is President Trump suspends the green card lottery program used by the killer to stay in the United States. Coming up, what we are learning about this killer's background. Also ahead, a judge in Wisconsin was caught behaving badly. She went to court, and this judge got her own judgment from a jury. We're going to explain. And do not forget our outrage of the day. It is the infamous Fulton County Jail in Georgia, a dirty, insect-infested facility, and now inmates have to worry about fires. It is an outrageous story. But first, several 100,000 documents related to convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. That is what Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche vowed would be released by today. Today is the deadline for the Department of Justice to comply with the Epstein Transparency Act. President Trump signed the Epstein Files Transparency Act into law a month ago. Last night, former Vice President Kamala Harris told Jimmy Kimmel why the files were not released during the Biden administration.
We, perhaps to our damage, but we strongly and rightly believed that there should be an absolute separation between what we wanted as an administration and what the Department of Justice did. We absolutely adhered to that, and it was right to do that. The Justice Department would make its decisions independent of any political or personal vendetta or concern that we may have. And that's the way it worked.
And at this hour, Democrats are threatening action if the Department of Justice does not meet the deadline by the end of today. California Congressman Ro Khanna, who authored the Epstein bill that Trump signed, says this.
Anyone who tampers with these documents or conceals documents or engages in excessive redaction will be prosecuted because of obstruction of justice. We will prosecute individuals regardless of whether they're the Attorney General or a career or political appointee.
Professor Emeritus at Harvard Law School, Alan Dershowitz, joins me. Good afternoon, sir. And we're just listening to Representative Ro Khanna say that to be prosecuted. But the fact is that it would be the Justice Department having to prosecute itself. So I don't know if that would ever happen, at least not in the near future. But tell me your thoughts as we wait to see if the Justice Department meets its deadline, which I assume is midnight tonight.
Well, according to at least several Democratic congressmen that were on television, what we expect to see is more and more McCarthyism. That is, they're going to release the names of the people who are accused. So, John Smith, you're accused. But we're not going to tell you who accused you because we're going to redact the names of the accusers. And we're not going to tell you that the accuser has a long history of perjury and made up stories about a lot of other people. We're just going to put your name out. And that's what I'm scared of. What I'm scared of is this new Epstein McCarthyism. You name the names, but you don't give the information to those who are accused necessary to show that the accusations are false.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second. We are just learning that the Department of Justice, we're just learning the second, the Department of Justice has just released a treasure trove of documents. I don't know if it's the complete amount, but they're releasing some.
Good. No, I'm glad, but they should release everything. There should be no redactions. If you're somebody who's accused somebody, you no longer have the right to privacy. Under our Constitution, anybody who's accused has the right to confront witnesses. And we can't assume that everybody who accuses is a victim. We know already there's a woman named Sarah Ransom. She accused Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Richard Branson, Donald Trump, said she had videotapes, sex tapes of them having sex with young people. And then she admitted she made the whole thing up. Imagine if they released the names of the people accused and they withhold the information about Sarah Ransom, that she is a proved perjurer. That's what I'm afraid of. I'm a civil libertarian. I care about real victims, and anybody who's a real victim is compensated, but false victims should be prosecuted. People who made up stories should be prosecuted.
All right, let's talk for a second about statute of limitations. This case has been, are these cases, you say people should be prosecuted, whether it's false stories or doing some other illegal conduct with young girls. Is it too late, or does the statute still include these cases?
This is another form of McCarthyism. There is no statute of limitations when an accuser accuses somebody. So somebody accuses you of having had sex with her or him 30 years ago, that's okay. But if she makes a false accusation 5 years ago, that's not okay, because the statute of limitations hasn't been extended on false accusations, but it has been extended on the accusations themselves. That's another form of Epstein-McCarthyism. We are turning the law on its head. We are violating the Magna Carta, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all in the name of Epstein victims. Now, there are some real Epstein victims who really suffered, but there are people out there, and I know names of people who never heard of Jeffrey Epstein, never met him, but their lawyer said, hey, you were in Palm Beach at the time. Why don't you say you had sex with Jeffrey Epstein? You'll collect $50,000. And they did. So we have to look at both sides of the equation. In our constitutional system, persons are presumed innocent until found guilty, not based on accusations. As you know, I was falsely accused. Fortunately, I was able to get the information and demonstrated conclusively that it was a false accusation. And then the woman admitted that she may have confused me, misidentified me. Let everybody else get the same benefits I got to be able to prove their innocence if they're innocent. The worst thing that could happen is naming names. And we know the names. There are prominent people out there. There's the former Majority Leader of the Senate, the former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, the granddaughter of Jacques Cousteau. All of them have been named. I don't know whether any of them are guilty. They've been named by people who have real credibility issues. There's a woman out there who names only Jews because she says Jews are pedophiles, all Jews are pedophiles, and the Holocaust never occurred. So and this woman's been on CNN with her lawyer as if she's a credible person. And what this information that's going to be given out today is going to give the accusations, but it's not going to say that this woman named Farmer has a history of Holocaust denial, attacking Jews, and lying. So, you know, we have to make sure sides are presented.
If everything is not released, or if there is material released but it's redacted, it's all blackened out, and we hit the deadline midnight, and it's that transparency sort of means transparency, although there might be some limitations. What happens next?
Well, not everything is going to be released today. Already the Deputy Attorney General correctly pointed out that it was an unrealistic deadline that Congress imposed. They're going to do the best they can, but they are going to redact things. And I don't like the criteria for redaction that Congress set out because it's all one-sided. But we're going to see over the next few weeks more and more of this come out. Probably the vast majority of it will come out today, and we'll see whether they include both sides or just on one side.
Do you have any doubt? I mean, if you go on the internet, there's some people that say that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered. Former Attorney General Bob Barr said that he was not murdered. So I think some people have said that the autopsy showed it was suspicious. Where are you in this sort of line? Murder or suicide?
I don't think Jeffrey Epstein was suicidal. He died over a weekend. On the Monday, he might have been granted bail. So I think there's a strong argument that he was not suicidal, but I can't think of any theory under which somebody could have gotten to him and killed him. So,
well, what else is there? If it's not suicide, I guess it's natural causes is a possibility, but no autopsy has suggested that. What else? What's left is murder or an accident.
He was either murdered or he committed suicide. I'm telling you, I don't think he was suicidal, but that doesn't mean he didn't commit suicide. I hadn't seen him in years and years and years. So it's possible he became suicidal, but I think you have to look very hard at this. And we have Dr. Baden, one of the most celebrated forensic pathologists in the history of the country, who says that the ligature and the marks on the neck are not consistent with suicide. So I have an open mind on this issue.
I do too, and you mentioned Dr. Baden. You know, I've worked on him in dozens of years, and so many cases going back. He is the best of the best and considered the gold standard among us. And so,
and he has
said that
he has no axe to grind. He's just looking for the truth.
Professor Alan Dershowitz, thank you, sir. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Coming up, warning signs. They're there. So why was nothing done? Don't they even care? Our outrage of the day is next when the record continues.
People can't stop talking about Rob Schmidt.
I trust the news from Rob Schmidt every single day.
They say he's no BS.
No BS. No liberal crap.
He hates liars.
The honesty and up-to-date news and none of the fake news.
He tells it better than anyone.
Everything is straight, legit, real news.
He's your voice.
Rob Schmidt, 7 p.m. Wouldn't miss it.
Tune in to Rob Schmidt tonight on Newsmax.
I love Newsmax.
It's the Blue Compass RV annual Blue Tag clearance. Save over 40% on select new RVs during our largest sale of the year. Plus, every RV comes with a 1-year VIP membership to RV Complete, a $5,000 value. Visit us online or in store today.
From drained investment accounts and stolen tax returns to lost wages and hiring lawyers, identity theft can cost you more than you might think. That's why only LifeLock offers the $1 Million Protection Package, which covers stolen funds, experts and lawyers, and out-of-pocket expenses up to $3 million in total. Don't face the high cost of identity theft alone. Protect your future and finances with LifeLock. Join today.
I'm David Wright, former New York Mets third baseman, and I support the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. I've seen firsthand the great work they do helping our firefighters, our police, and our soldiers and their families. T2T is asking for your support for these brave men and women. Just $11 a month will go a long way and make a big difference. Go to t2t.org to find out more. Let's go Mets, and let's do good together.
For pain in multiple spots like here, here, or here, Salonpas patches stick firmly and remove comfortably once your pain is gone. Salonpas. It's good medicine.
Some good news. Last night, a near week-long manhunt for the Brown University killer ended. Police found 48-year-old Portuguese national Claudio Neves Valente dead. He died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound at a storage facility in Salem, New Hampshire. Investigators say that after killing 2 at Brown University on Saturday and shooting others, Neves Valente drove 50 miles to Brookline, Massachusetts. That's where he killed an MIT professor. Authorities say the 2 crossed paths more than 30 years ago at a Portuguese school. The motive for all these killings and shootings, unclear. Apparently, from multiple reports, this case was cracked by a homeless person living at Brown University. In 2017, the shooter came to the United States on a DV-1 visa and then got a green card. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem says, in part, quote, "This heinous individual should never have been allowed in our country. At President Trump's direction, I'm immediately directing USCIS to pause the DV-1 program to ensure that no more Americans are harmed by this disastrous program," end quote. Rhode Island multimedia producer Ben DeCastro joins me. Nice to talk to you. And tell me, when did this homeless guy first talk to the police, and did they take him seriously at first?
So there's a little bit of a timeline that they're trying to put together and stitch before they really release it out. It's my understanding that the homeless person started communication with law enforcement around Wednesday afternoon. That's about the time when law enforcement put out imaging of a person that they wanted to contact, and that confused some people around the area. Was this a second suspect? Was this potentially a second shooter or an accomplice? But it was simply somebody that potentially had a run-in. And, you know, as the story has started to reveal itself, you learn that this person who's on the screen right now, who's going by the name of John, is an actual Brown University graduate, homeless, living in the basement. And he had contact with the perpetrator over the past 2 weeks, actually chasing him down at one point, trying to figure out, what are you doing around here? And they had a bit of a spat back and forth. And, well, on Wednesday, his information certainly helped to break open the case, as a lot of the law enforcement sources around here will tell you.
Well, what was his information? Because, I mean, it's a very intriguing story and pretty, sad that a Brown University former student is a homeless person living there. But it seems like there was this rental car that really was the tip that directed the police to New Hampshire to the storage place.
You're right, Greta. It was the homeless person who goes by the name of John, had a couple run-ins with him as he himself would walk around the neighborhood and he just looked out of place. He looked a little odd, and I guess a few times he might have observed Claudio clicking a key fob as if to unlock the door, and at one point he got spooked, and that actually triggered a confrontation very quickly you don't know me, who are you, and a little back and forth, and that just sort of stuck out in John's mind. And then on Wednesday, they started seeing information on Reddit, of all places, that you really need to check this out. This is potentially something. It's got an out-of-state plate. There were a lot of little signs here, and then he was able to contact. He actually approached two police officers on the east side of Providence and said, I've got info for you, and that's how it just started unraveling.
What does say something for me, like it's so often that these cases are solved because of incredible help by the public. See something, you say something. However, it is a little bit disappointing that for the first couple of days, the news from law enforcement was that things were safe, that the two were not connected between the MIT and Rhode Island. They would have been better to say we just don't know, but they gave sort of a false sense, at least I interpret that everything was fine, and there was a killer out there.
Certainly felt like that. There were a lot of people who were concerned. And of course, Greta, I don't have to tell you to look at a calendar to know that we're in the holiday season. Brown University is a downtown campus. There are a lot of shops. There are a lot of hustle and bustle that happen around there. So it's harming business owners. Hopefully people will be able to get out this weekend now that this has been is one step closer to being, resolved. We still don't know the motive yet. A lot of things still have to come to light.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. The motive is, he knew the MIT professor. Those are the reports. But is there any indication that he knew either the killing victims, there were a lot of people shot as well, at Brown, or did he say anything when he did the shooting inside that auditorium? Anything at all to make it look like it was not random but targeted?
The reports are that he made some kind of a barking sound when he entered the classroom prior to firing. So you have that. There's really nothing that's come to light yet as far as a connection, but Claudio has been in the neighborhood for at least 2 weeks. He's been in and out of that building multiple times, walked around, and he's a former student. And as you've heard through the various press conferences, there's an old part of the building, there's a new part of the building. The old part doesn't have as much technology. The new part has cameras everywhere. So he could have been there, and they just now that they know his face, and they knew that as of yesterday, trying to put that together and see exactly how many times has he been in that area.
Very strange. Anyway, Ben DeCastro, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Greta.
And last night, a Wisconsin judge, Hannah Duggan, was found guilty in federal court of felony obstruction. On April 18th, as you'll recall, ICE agents showed up at the Milwaukee County Circuit Court, where she is a judge. The federal agents were there to arrest an illegal immigrant. But what happened? Judge Duggan was seen on video helping the Mexican national evade arrest by sneaking him out at the back door. The immigrant was in her court for a domestic abuse hearing. Duggan faces up to 5 years in prison. She is expected to appeal the verdict. A sentencing date has not yet been set. And it's time for our outrage of the day. Remember the Fulton County Jail that we have told you about over and over and over again? That's the jail Fani Willis asks judges to detain people before they've even had a trial. It's also the jail where there have been multiple murders inside, and at least one neglected dead body was found with maggots. And now, there's more news at the jail. Last Friday, the Fulton County Sheriff says an inmate set trash on fire in this overcrowded jail. Inmates who are locked up and can't leave or escape fire say jail staff panic, and that emergency equipment such as multiple fire extinguishers didn't work. The result of the fire, several inmates and 4 staff members were hospitalized. Now, the sheriff has pushed back on the claim, saying, quote, everything worked as normal at this point, end quote. Of course, normal is a low bar at this jail. But what is really outrageous on top of outrageous is that there were and are many, many warning signs of the problems, the unconstitutional violations, and the dangers inside this jail. Last December, former Attorney General Merrick Garland even admitted to me that he knew about the unconstitutional situation at the Fulton County Jail, but he did nothing about it. He didn't care. And before that, in October of last year, the Department of Justice, then led by Attorney General Merrick Garland, even had its own investigation about the conditions at the jail. The DOJ's own report concluded the jail grossly violated the Constitution and federal law. So did Attorney General Garland move the jailed prisoners to a facility that is constitutional? No, he did nothing. At best, in January of this year, just before Garland left office, the Garland-led DOJ released a 71-page consent decree. It said in part, quote, "The Fulton County will develop and promptly implement a comprehensive plan to inspect and fix all existing physical plant deficiencies in the jail," end quote. So just a plan. Those issues were supposed to be fixed immediately. The Constitution requires that. But nearly a year later, where we are now, nothing's been done. And to make things more outrageous, if that's even possible, that arrogant Fulton County District Attorney, Fani Willis, who asks judges to jail people in this unconstitutional jail that she knows about, has a very inflated view of herself.
I'm the best DA in the Southeast. Why wouldn't I be proud of my work?
Best DA in the Southeast, and she is proud. You'd be ashamed. Frankly, Fani Willis is so lucky all those inmates in that jail did not burn to death in that fire. That would be her legacy, mass deaths, and not that she hired her lover to prosecute candidate for president Donald Trump and others. Coming up, Russian President Vladimir Putin is defending President Trump. We're going to tell you how when the record continues.
O'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Patriots. America was built by people who believed in something greater than themselves, something worth protecting. Today, one of America's top growing industries is political campaigns, a multi-billion-dollar movement powered by tech, data, and the American people. Meet FullPack, a tech platform trusted by thousands of campaigns nationwide to connect directly with voters. FullPack is expected to begin trading on NASDAQ soon, under the ticker GOTV for Get Out the Vote. But before we begin trading, we're offering a limited number of shares to patriots like you for $5 each, providing your portfolio exposure to this fast-growing market. Capitalism helped build America into the shining beacon on the hill. Now you can own a stake in the heartbeat of America. Visit gotv.com/invest or call 877730-GOTV to learn more.
Total Beats Ultimate Heart Health is the newest innovation from America's best-selling Beats brand. Ultimate Heart Health contains a key ingredient clinically shown to deliver 2 times better blood pressure support, plus CoQ10 for even better heart health. Find Total Beats Ultimate Heart Health at Walmart today.
Hey, I just got a text from my sister. You remember Rick, her neighbor?
Sure. He's the 76-year-old guy who still runs marathons, right?
Sadly, not anymore.
What? You mean...
Mm-hmm. Just like that.
Wow. So sudden. We're not about to have the we need life insurance conversation again, are we?
No, we're having the we're getting coverage so we don't have to worry about it conversation.
So you're calling about the $9.95 a month plan from Colonial Penn?
I am. We put it off long enough. We are getting that $9.95 plan today.
Is it time for you to call about the $9.95 plan? I'm Jonathan from Colonial Penn Life Insurance Company. Sometimes we just need a reminder not to take today for granted. It could be the death of someone you know or a health scare. That's why today could be a great day to call for free information about Colonial Penn's $9.95 plan. If you're age 50 to 85, you can get guaranteed acceptance whole life insurance starting at just $9.95 a month. There are no health questions, so you can't be turned down for any health reason. This is permanent coverage. Just pay your premiums for lifelong security. The $9.95 plan is Colonial Penn's #1 most popular whole life plan. Options start at just $9.95 a month. That's less than 35 cents a day. Your rate can never go up. It's locked in for life. Don't put it off. Take the first easy step. Call today for free information. And you'll also get this free beneficiary planner. So call now.
Call 1-800-601-9997 for your free information and free gift. That's 1-800-601-9997. There's no risk or obligation. That number again is 1-800-601-9997. 1-800-601-9997. Call now.
Hello, Colonial Penn?
President Trump is ramping up pressure on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. On Tuesday, President Trump ordered a total and complete blockade of oil, sanctioned oil tankers going in and out of Venezuela. Former United States Ambassador to Venezuela from 2007 to 2010, Patrick Duddy joins me. Nice to talk to you, sir. And you certainly have an interesting history because as ambassador in 2008, the predecessor to Maduro expelled you because he didn't like something the U.S. government was doing. So you have an interesting and very close history to Venezuela. So tell me your thoughts on what is happening now.
Well, right now, I think the president has is engaged in a campaign to pressure Venezuela in a variety of different ways. The most recent announcements indicate an intensification and an escalation of those efforts as he moves to essentially block a vital economic lifeline for the Maduro regime, a regime which has largely eviscerated the national economy. And their oil industry, which has been sanctioned for some time, is only functioning at about 1/3 the level it was when Hugo Chavez was elected president all the way back in 1998.
Tell me, is Maduro, do you believe that he is the head of the cartel, of a drug cartel? Because that's a whole other issue, because we have him under indictment here in the United States, which makes it a little bit difficult to negotiate with him or try to do anything with him. But is he leading a drug cartel?
Well, I think that the Nicolas Maduro regime has become essentially, a criminal operation. This has developed over time, but one of the things that we've seen is that as the illicit economy crashed, illicit activity spiked. And whether or not the allegation of cartel leadership involves a perception of him as a formal leader in a formal organization, clearly, the illicit activity that takes place very broadly across the country could not happen without his explicit approval.
What was the relationship between Maduro and Chavez? I mean, Maduro seems like he was like an unlikely candidate to become president at the time he became president. But what did Maduro do before he became president?
Oh, well, actually, I first met Nicolas Maduro before I was ambassador and before he was, as he became, foreign minister. But he served for some years as President Chavez's foreign minister, then as his vice president, and then he was his hand-picked successor.
Is there any chance that his military is going to cave on him? Because I assume that his protection, he's eviscerated the economy. The inflation level that I read yesterday was 556%, which I thought was a misprint, but that's what I read every place, and ours is less than 3. But is there a chance that that his military is going to turn on him? Because I suppose that's the only thing that keeps him propped up, because his people are not wild about him. We've seen the protests.
Yeah, much of the senior military is complicit in the regime's criminal activity. That said, there are almost certainly elements of the military which are not complicit. And insofar as President Trump has said that actual strikes on Venezuela are possible, I have a sense that, or I suspect that there would be elements of the military which would very much like to avoid a direct clash with American forces. Maduro has said, and others within his circle have insisted that he will not leave power voluntarily. And I think that's the fundamental reason behind this campaign, which President Trump has mentioned. There's a wide range of illicit activity, drug smuggling, illicit oil exportation. They've driven out 8 million of their own citizens, but they have managed to integrate some of the senior military into the highest levels of government. And those people, it seems to me, feel too vulnerable to overthrow him.
Well, we certainly put the squeeze on him in terms of the tankers and the blockade. Trump is hitting these narco-terrorist boats that are coming north, and I assume that's going to discourage a lot of them there. I spoke with President Lukashenko last week, and I asked him if he would give a safe haven, essentially, to Maduro if he wanted to be exiled, and he gave me sort of a vague answer, but I think he could go there. But the question is that at some point, if it does come, if push comes to shove, and the United States does take some military action inside Venezuela, does Venezuela even have a military capacity to fight back?
Well, they certainly don't have the capacity to challenge the United States. They have Army, Navy, Air Force. They certainly have some weaponry, and they've been buying weaponry for years from Russia. But the force that has been marshaled in the Southern Caribbean is very formidable. And I can't believe that the Venezuelan military would last long if the U.S. decides to become kinetic.
It's so sad because if you go back to even before you served as ambassador in the 90s, I mean, it was such a rich country. It has more oil reserves than Saudi Arabia. It had everything, and now it has nothing.
Yeah, 84% of the populace apparently now lives in poverty. It was formerly, arguably, the richest country in South America. Now it's one of the 2 or 3 poorest. And according to, I think it's Transparency International, it's the 177th most corrupt country in the world. Only exceeded in that category by, I think, Somalia and maybe one other sub-Saharan African country.
Well, I've actually been down at the border about 2 years ago and just saw the people coming out into Colombia, the Venezuelans just fleeing. It looked like a faucet. People were just fleeing with everything they owned, suitcases, everything, to get out of there. And that was 2 years ago. So I can only imagine it's, so much worse even today.
Yeah, well, that's 25% of the population which is left. 25%, about 8 million people.
That's huge. Ambassador, I hope you'll come back because I think this story is not going away not anytime soon. Thank you, sir.
Well, perhaps we'll chat again.
Thank you. And it's been a busy week for President Trump, and this afternoon the president announced his administration has reached agreements with 9 of the world's largest drug manufacturers. These agreements are aimed at lowering drug prices for Americans. President's Day, though, it's not over, at least not yet, because tonight President Trump will be in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. White House correspondent Mike Carter is already in Rocky Mount, North Carolina with the latest. Mike.
Hey, Greta, good evening. Here in North Carolina, the president continuing his barnstorming tour of the country, talking about what the Trump administration is doing to lower prices for Americans. And today at the White House, before the president travels here to the Tar Heel State, the heads of 9 of the world's largest drug manufacturers agreeing to President Trump's lowest in the nation, his lowest in the world drug prices, giving Americans a much reprieve from heavy drug costs.
As of today, 14 out of the 17 largest pharmaceutical companies, but they've all agreed, have now agreed to drastically lower drug prices for their American patients, for the American people and patients. This represents the greatest victory for patient affordability in the history of American health care by far, and every single American will benefit. So this is the biggest thing ever to happen on drug pricing and on health care.
And among the most notable of those pledges today, Greta, was Bristol Myers Squibb in its groundbreaking blood thinner drug, Eliquis. It agreed to allow those who are on Medicaid to now receive that drug for free. Now, the companies that were represented at the White House today make up the majority of the 17 companies President Trump sent letters to earlier this summer asking them to lower their prices as part of his most favored nations policy. pharmacy that it matches. You pay a drug here in the United States, you pay the same as you do anywhere else in the world, the lowest price anywhere in the world. Well, President Trump tonight, Greta, in exchange, or I should say, with those companies' cooperation today, those companies, those drug companies, will now receive a 3-year grace period in which they will not be affected by President Trump's pharmaceutical-specific tariffs as long as those companies agree to invest in U.S. manufacturing. Here's what RFK Jr. had to say about today's announcement.
A couple of days ago, when one of my sons, 29 years old, very, very left-wing Democrat, and disagrees with a lot of the policies of this administration, he called me and he said, Dad, I want to tell you how proud I am about this. This is the best achievement that could happen to our country. This is something Bernie Sanders has been clamoring for 25 years. Elizabeth Warren has been clamoring for. Joe Biden promised the American people.
Well, Rocky Mount, North Carolina, where the president will speak tonight, is a recently redrawn congressional district that state Republicans gerrymandered to add more likely GOP voters ahead of next year's midterms. But one voter I spoke to today, Greta, who voted for Kamala Harris in 2024, says he believes the president is doing his best to lower costs. He just hopes it will continue. What are folks talking about? You know, when you go to work, you're at the gas station, what's the most concerning issue on people's minds these days?
On the economy.
Did you vote for President Trump?
No.
Who'd you vote for?
The lady.
Oh, you voted for Kamala Harris.
I wanted her to win, but Trump won, so.
Did he win you over?
Yes, he did. He's doing a real good job right now.
All right, and you say that as a Kamala Harris voter?
Yes. He's doing a real good job. I like what he's doing with the crime rate and stuff like that.
What would it do for your family if he's able to bring these prices down, especially on groceries?
It'll help us a whole lot. Whole lot.
And Greta, the president also saying today in the first week of January, he'll be calling the heads of the biggest health insurance companies and asking them to also lower their prices. All right, President Trump speaking here in Rocky Mount, North Carolina at 9 o'clock Eastern tonight. Greta, the president will then head to Mar-a-Lago for his Christmas vacation over the weekend.
Mike, I have a question about this Eliquis that you said is going to be free. Did you say just for Medicaid? Because it's sort of an age-related drug. Eliquis is generally for blood thinner, and it's for a more older population. It's frightfully expensive. Do people on Medicare, the older population, not get this free?
That wasn't indicated today, Greta, but Medicaid, the CEO of Bristol Myers Squibb, saying today that Medicaid patients would receive it for free. We'll have to follow up and see if that also applies to Medicare patients as well.
Which, of course, would be the government paying Medicare. Anyway, Mike Carter, thank you.
You got it, Greta.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is defending President Trump. President Putin says President Trump is right in his lawsuit against the BBC. As you probably remember, President Trump is seeking up to $10 billion in damages from BBC over its editing of his January 6, 2021 speech. The BBC editing, which was bad, has resulted in 2 very senior people at the BBC resigning. Yesterday, during Putin's annual press conference, he was asked about Trump's lawsuit. Here's President Putin.
Well, these are their family matters. They should deal with them themselves. I don't want to interfere. I just don't want to touch upon this topic, not to make it more difficult for you. There is such problem. There is a problem of falsification of information, fake news, and I think that President Trump is right.
Coming up, is time up for TikTok? That when the record continues.
Newsmax.
Shoots it straight. No talking down to me.
Don't tell me how to think.
Don't tell me how to think. Don't tell me how to think.
I trust Newsmax. Newsmax.
They don't tell me how to think. They let me decide.
Real news for real people.
Hey everybody, Howard Garrett, the Dirt Doctor here. You know, homeowners, farmers, and ranchers don't want to worry about frozen water supplies. I don't either. Freeze Miser product helps me avoid those. It installs in minutes and activates when the water temperature falls below 37 degrees. The Freeze Miser even works in extreme freezing weather. No batteries or electricity, and it's made in the USA. Available at your favorite retailer or at freezemiser.com. It's the Freeze Miser, and it works.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work, try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Order online and save $45. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. Visit urgentcarekit.com/news, promo code NEWS. That's urgentcarekit.com/news, promo code NEWS.
Samaritan's Purse is ready to show the love of Christ to people in the most difficult circumstances. But we can't go without you. With your support, we can build homes, heal hearts, provide critical relief, and bring hope to a world in need. Donate now at SamaritansPurse.org. Let's get to work in Jesus' name.
It's the Blue Compass RV annual Blue Tag clearance. Save over 40% on select new RVs during our largest sale of the year. Plus, every RV comes with a 1-year VIP membership to RV Complete, a $5,000 value. Visit us online or in store today.
How would you live your life differently if you knew it was only a matter of time before you went completely deaf and blind? I have Usher syndrome, a rare condition that's causing me to lose all of my vision and hearing at the same time. I'm a fighter, trying to hold on to what I still have. But I can't do it alone.
Hello, everyone. It's President Donald J. Trump, and it's Trump time. Check out this red beauty. It's one of my new watches. Wear it proudly on your wrist, and everyone will know exactly what it's for, who it represents. It's really going to be something special. It's for your favorite president. Get your watch today at gettrumpwatches.com. These make a great gift. It's Trump time.
There is finally a TikTok deal. TikTok's parent company has now signed an agreement to avoid being banned in the United States. ByteDance, which is TikTok's parent company and is based in China, reached a deal with a group of American companies. TikTok's CEO released a memo. It reads in part, quote, "The agreement specified that the U.S. joint venture will be majority owned by American investors, governed by a new 7-member majority American board of directors, and subject to terms that protect Americans' data and U.S. national security." The memo also says TikTok will, quote, "operate as an independent entity with authority over U.S. data protection, algorithm security, content moderation, and software assurance," end quote. The American investment companies are Oracle, Silver Lake, and MGX. Each will own 15% of the company. You'll remember that back in September, President Trump signed an executive order to put TikTok in majority U.S. ownership. This deal complies with Trump's September order. The deal is set to close in a month. And tonight, Newsmax is airing a Christmas special hosted by my colleague, John Bachman. John went to Israel and interviewed U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. Here's a clip of Mike Huckabee's Christmas in Israel.
This will be the first time I've been here at Christmas time. In all the 100-plus trips that I'd been to Israel before, I'd never been here during Christmas. Saturday, my wife and I went into the Old City. We went to Santa's house. We met the Jerusalem Santa Claus. We went to shops that are just totally decorated for Christmas. So there's a real strong presence of the Christmas spirit in Jerusalem.
Host of John Bachman Now, and my colleague, of course, John Bachman joins me. What a great trip, what a great clip, and what a great special it's going to be. Tell me, what was the most fascinating part about it for you?
Well, it was really interesting, Greta, to be in the West Bank, in Bethlehem in particular. It is a magical time of the year there. This is the first time in 2 years since the war started that they had put up a Christmas tree in the town square. But we tried very hard to find pilgrims and Christians who had come to the Church of the Nativity to experience that at this time of the year, and we did not find any. It's a Muslim majority area, and that really seemed to hang over everything. I actually talked to a couple of the shopkeepers that sell tourist items and trinkets and stuff like that, and they just have not had any tourism come through that area since the war started. They wanted to get the message out that it was safe to come back, but it felt a little hollow. It was amazing to be in these locations. For those of us that go to church, you've heard about these places our entire lives. So you hear about them from history class as well. And it was amazing to be there in the spot where Jesus was actually born. But there was something missing, and that was the pilgrims who, prior to the war and before the COVID era, would go there en masse.
Do you get a sense that the war is over or not? I mean, I haven't read that Hamas has laid down its weapons, which was one of the 20 points, but do you have the sense the war is still there? I realize Jerusalem is quite a distance from Gaza, but still.
No, the war is kind of front and center, and everybody hopes that the peace actually holds. It was interesting, as you know, Greta, the important part of the assignment is also to go out and kind of just talk to people away from your camera people and your crew and just have regular conversations with people. And there's an overwhelming sense in Israel that this is the best opportunity still. Even though the fighting continues, the ceasefire is nominally in place. It's interesting that I felt like Donald Trump was less controversial in Israel than he is here. Most of the people that I talk to do feel like he is their best opportunity to help them broker a lasting peace. But just to go back to your point, I mean, when we were in Nazareth in northern Israel and Galilee, we were hearing F-16s fly overhead. They were doing bombing runs in Lebanon, attacking Hezbollah sites. And, there was talk, I think right as I was leaving is when they actually put that strike on the Hamas leader who was still in Gaza at the time. And so, people are kind of wondering what's next, but they do feel like there is still hope for the ceasefire and peace, at least from the people that I spoke to.
Well, 8 o'clock tonight, it's going to be, I'm looking forward to it, John. The clip looked great, and, I'm sure it's going to be a fascinating interview with the ambassador as well. John Bachman, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Greta.
And once again, just a reminder, you can watch this special, Mike Huckabee's Christmas in Israel with John Bachman, right here on Newsmax, 8 p.m. Eastern. Coming up, an extraterrestrial comet that we've been following is now close to Earth. How close? That when the record continues.
The Wall Street Journal said silver could be the trade of a decade.
Eric Sprott said $250 to $500 an ounce is entirely possible.
Gold recently surpassed its inflation-adjusted all-time high. Silver's inflation-adjusted all-time high is $209 an ounce.
And silver went up 1,300% from 1974 to 1980. Silver's got a lot of room to run.
Give Patriot Gold Group a call at 1-800-778-4156.
Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold and silver dealer nationwide. The only firm nationwide where you, the client, work directly with an owner. Home of the No Fee for Life IRA. See how easy it is to protect your IRA with physical gold and silver.
Call now, 1-800-778-4156.
JB Smoove, what are you doing here?
I'm always here. And you're here for that handsome lanky man club meeting.
No, I'm shooting a consumer cellular commercial. We should get you signed up.
Aren't I too young?
We got deals for people over 50. That's you. Same reliable coverage.
That sounds great. Sign me up. But I went in on that handsome lanky man club. I'm handsome. I'm lanky.
See how we can cut your bill. And right now, get your second month free. Call Consumer Cellular.
Make it happen, Teddy.
Now it's a great time to play Solitaire Grand Harvest and enjoy a new world of solitaire. Brr, a cold world. This Christmas, discover all the holiday fun with exciting features from Santa. Like our winter tournaments, festive mini-games, and challenging levels. Ever built a farm in the snow? 'Tis the season to turn classic into fantastic. So download Solitaire Grand Harvest for free and see for yourself.
Hi, I'm Ben Cozy. Isn't holiday travel a pain in the neck? You're cramped, uncomfortable, and forget about getting any rest. There's nothing cozy about airplane seats or hard plastic benches and those so-called travel pillows. They just don't cut it. You don't need another travel pillow. You need Be Cozy, the world's most comfortable neck pillow. Trapped in the middle seat? Wrap Be Cozy around your neck to stop chin drop, bobblehead napping. Smashed up against the window? Fold Be Cozy over and tuck it onto your shoulder for super side support. Frequent flyer miles got you sitting out? Turn Be Cozy to the side for the perfect pillow position. Hey, everyone wants to be cozy, so get the world's most comfortable travel neck pillow and be cozy like me, Ben Cozy. You get to be cozy. Everyone gets to be cozy. Only Be Cozy has patented overlapping arms so you get double support and the comfort you need in any seat on any trip. Go online right now and get this special holiday offer. Buy one Be Cozy, get one 50% off. So don't wait. Get yours now.
Well, it happened. A visitor from outside our solar system got as close as it could to our planet Earth. It was the comet, 3I Atlas. Don't worry, though. It was not as close as you might think, or it wasn't close enough to create a problem. The closest it got was 168 million miles away. So where is it headed next? Yesterday, I spoke with Harvard professor and astrophysicist Dr. Avi Loeb about the comet and its path.
It looked quite unusual in the sense that it flies through the plane of the planets around the sun, and it also has an anti-tail. Unlike the cometary tails that we are used to, there is a jet pointed towards the sun. We saw it from the start, we see it right now, and the question is, why is this jet going out to about 1 million kilometers in the direction of the sun? And it's sort of different from what we have seen before around comets. It's roughly the size of Manhattan Island. We don't have a close-up photograph of it. And of course, that would have nailed the nature of the object if we had it. You know, if we saw a rock, an iceberg, we could immediately conclude that it originated from the vicinity of a star by a natural process. If we saw, on the other hand, a spacecraft that has buttons on it, the question would have arisen as to whether we should press a button. It will come closest to Jupiter on March 16, 2026, and it arrives exactly at the distance from Jupiter where Jupiter's gravity dominates over the sun's gravity. So an interesting question is, did it target Jupiter to deploy some kind of a device there? Or maybe it's just a chance coincidence, and let's just wait and see.
Tonight, astronomers hope that we will get new images of the comet before it leaves us forever. Scientists predict the comet will leave our solar system in 2028. And President Trump is going all out for America's 250th birthday. Yesterday, the president announced he will be hosting the first ever Patriots games.
In my campaign for president, I pledged to give America the most spectacular birthday party the world has ever seen for America's 250th anniversary on July 4th next year. Already we've had big celebrations to commemorate the 250th birthdays of the Army, the Navy, and the United States Marines, but there is much, much more to come. In the fall, we will host the first ever Patriot Games, an unprecedented 4-day athletic event featuring the greatest high school athletes, one young man and one young woman from each state and territory. But I promise there will be no men playing in women's sports. You're not going to see that. You'll see everything but that.
Coming up, have you ever played a game of horse? Well, this basketball game was taken quite literally. That when the record continues.
They killed her brother. They shot her dog. And they took her hostage for 400 days and terrifying nights. They raped her. They put guns to her head. They starved her. These are the stories of Israeli women attacked by Hamas. If you are supporting Hamas and radicalized Palestinians, this is what you are supporting. Choose freedom, not terror.
Your cardiovascular system is a big place. Too big to assume diet and exercise are enough. Where do you start? Here. Cardiovascular Health Daily supports healthy blood pressure with ingredients backed by 5 clinical studies. And Cholesterol Health Daily, clinically researched ingredients like aged black garlic shown to support HDL levels by up to 11%. Your cardiovascular system powers everything you do. Now there's a simple way to return the favor every day. Only human.
Meet Andrew from the Zebra. Andrew lives and breathes insurance.
Andrew stays up all night watching the zebra find people's savings. You might think nobody could love insurance as much as Andrew, but at the zebra, everybody's really into savings. The zebra monitors your insurance and informs you of savings the moment we find it. So you never have to second-guess your policy or your price. Nobody does insurance like the zebra. Find out how much you can save today.
Hello, everyone. It's President Donald J. Trump, and it's Trump time. Check out this red beauty. It's one of my new watches. Wear it proudly on your wrist, and everyone will know exactly what it's for, who it represents. It's really going to be something special. It's for your favorite president. Get your watch today at GetTrumpWatches.com. These make a great gift. It's Trump time.
Patriots. America was built by people who believed in something greater than themselves, something worth protecting. Today, one of America's top growing industries is political campaigns, a multi-billion-dollar movement powered by tech, data, and the American people. Meet FullPack, a tech platform trusted by thousands of campaigns nationwide to connect directly with voters. FullPack is expected to begin trading on NASDAQ soon, under the ticker GOTV for Get Out the Vote. But before we begin trading, we're offering a limited number of shares to patriots like you for $5 each, providing your portfolio exposure to this fast-growing market. Capitalism helped build America into the shining beacon on the hill. Now you can own a stake in the heartbeat of America. Visit gotv.com/invest or call 877730-GOTV to learn more.
There's nothing worse than losing your dog before their time.
That's why I created Dr. Marty Nature's Blend, designed to help dogs with everything from digestive issues to itching, even moving better.
Nature's Blend works because it's freeze-dried. So instead of destroying the nutrients with high heat, they all get right into your dog's body.
Take it from a veterinarian with over 50 years of experience saving dogs' lives. I have never seen a food make this much impact on a dog's health.
For a limited time, get up to 54% off Dr. Marty Nature's Blend, plus a free gift with our special TV offer. Call or go to drmartypets.com/TV.
Sponsored by Dr. Marty Nature's Blend, the health of fresh food with the convenience of kibble. Visit drmartypets.com/TV.
The game of horse in basketball does not involve actual horses, at least not until now. A deputy at the Fresno County Sheriff's Office in California interrupted some kids playing basketball. The deputy was on his horse when he took over. He and the horse inched up to the basket. At first, the deputy struggled, but then he made a basket. He gave the ball back to the kids who were playing. The Chris Salcedo Show is up next. Have a great weekend.